I was
you okay,
celebrating my
Grandma?
62nd birthday at
Please, just
home
leave
when
me
my
alone.
10-year-old granddaughter discreetly placed a note in my hand. "Grandma, don't eat this, trust me," it read. I was frozen in shock. I decided to switch my cupcake with my daughter-in-law's, and what happened 5 minutes later left me in disbelief. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and tell us in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to see how far our stories reach. My name is Guadalupe, and I never imagined that my birthday would be the day my life was saved, but also the day I would discover just how deep family betrayal can go. Javier, my son, had planned a small party at his house. It was an intimate celebration, just the four of us, me, him, Alondra, my daughter-in-law, and Sophia, my 10-year-old granddaughter. Their house was cozy, tastefully decorated in beige and blue tones, colors that Alondra always said matched the family's energy. The walls were covered with family photographs, though I had noticed that the pictures of just Javier and me had gradually decreased in recent months. Small details that looking back should have warned me. The atmosphere that spring afternoon was pleasant. The dining table had been set with care, covered by a lace tablecloth I had given them last Christmas. In the center was a small bouquet of daisies, my favorite flowers, and 4 perfectly arranged place settings. Sunlight poured through the large windows, creating a golden, welcoming glow, a stark contrast to what was about to happen. Alondra had prepared my favorite dishes, herb-roasted chicken au gratin potatoes, and a salad of fresh greens. For dessert, she made chocolate cupcakes with cream cheese, frosting a recipe I'd taught her in the early years of her marriage to Javier. At the time, I took it as a gesture of affection, a way to honor me. How naive I was. "Mom, you look wonderful today," Javier said, hugging me as I arrived. His eyes sparkled with that genuine warmth that always filled my heart. Alondra greeted me with her usual restrained smile, a quick kiss on each cheek, and a hug that always seemed more formal than affectionate. Sophia, however, was different. Normally talkative and cheerful, she seemed tense, almost frightened. Her big brown eyes avoided mine, and when Alondra asked her to give me a hug, she did so stiffly, which puzzled me. I attributed her behavior to some family argument or a problem at school. Children often carry little worlds of worry that adults can't imagine. Dinner passed by with apparent normality. We talked about everyday things, Javier's job at the insurance company, the senior yoga classes I'd recently started, Sophia's progress at school. Alondra spoke little, but that wasn't unusual. I'd always thought of her as a reserved woman, though. Now I realize I'd confused calculating coldness for shyness. Still, I noticed small, unsettling details. The way Alondra kept checking her phone under the table. The way her eyes settled on me whenever she thought I wasn't looking. The nervous drumming of her fingers on the table. And more troubling, the glances exchanged between her and Javier, looks that seemed to convey messages I couldn't decipher. "It's time to sing Happy Birthday," Javier announced after the meal, bringing in the cupcakes on a decorative tray. Instead of a traditional cake, Alondra had made several cupcakes, and one of them had a small crown on top. I thought the gesture was sweet, ignoring the voice inside that wondered why there were no candles to blow out. As we started singing Happy Birthday, Sophia, sitting beside me, took advantage of her parents' distraction to slip a small piece of paper into my hand. She moved so quickly and discreetly that neither Javier nor Alondra noticed. The girl gave me an intense, almost pleading look before joining in the singing with a forced, cheerful voice. My heart was racing, though I didn't know why, and I kept the note closed in my hand. I waited until Javier went to get the camera, and Alondra went to the kitchen for plates to serve the cupcakes. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper under the table, keeping it hidden from everyone. The message, written in Sophia's childish yet urgent handwriting, read, "Grandma, don't eat the cupcake. Your life is in danger, trust me." Her writing seemed desperate, as if she'd written it in a hurry. The world seemed to freeze. The sounds around me faded into a distant buzz. I looked at the cupcake in front of me, so innocent, so tempting. My eyes met Sophia's. She was watching me intently, her small head giving a barely noticeable shake of no. My first reaction was disbelief. Surely my granddaughter was imagining things, but something in Sophia's eyes, a genuine urgency and fear, made me hesitate. I quickly put the note into my pants pocket as Alondra returned with the plates. Her smile seemed normal, but now I saw her differently. There was something predatory about her, something calculating that sent a chill down my spine. "Grandma, pick your cupcake," Sophia said, her voice strangely emphatic. Her eyes were fixed on mine, trying to tell me something more. Alondra quickly interjected. "No, sweetie, I already picked a special one for Grandma. This one here with the little crown made with extra love." She pushed the cupcake toward me. Her eyes darted nervously between my cupcake and my face, as if she were waiting for me to eat it. But I waited for the right moment and made a decision that would change everything. Taking advantage of a moment when everyone was distracted by a funny story my son was telling, I discreetly took the little crown off my cupcake and swapped it with Alondra's. It was a quick, almost imperceptible move. When I mentioned eating the cupcakes, my son said, "Let's make a toast first," raising his glass of wine. "To Mom, the strongest and most loving woman I know, happy birthday." We toasted, we drank, and then Alondra suggested we all take a bite of our cupcakes together for a photo. I pretended to bring mine to my mouth, but didn't bite it, watching closely as Alondra took a big bite of what was supposed to be my cupcake. Exactly 10 minutes of normal conversation went by. We were reminiscing about old stories when I noticed the first change in Alondra. Her forehead started to glisten with sweat despite the cool air. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she held her water glass. "Are you okay?" dear Javier asked, noticing her sudden paleness. "I think so," she replied weakly. "Maybe something I ate didn't sit well." Her eyes met mine for a second, a look of confusion that quickly turned into horrified understanding. She knew. She knew I had switched the cupcakes, and now she was feeling the effects of whatever she'd put in mine. Sophia watched the scene, eyes wide, her little face a mix of fear and relief. My heart ached for her. What a burden for someone so young to discover her own mother was capable of such evil. "I don't feel well," Alondra murmured, getting up abruptly. Her legs gave way almost immediately, and Javier barely caught her before she fell. "Alondra!" he shouted, panic clear in his voice. "What's happening? You're so pale!" She couldn't answer. Her eyes rolled back, and she began to shake uncontrollably, cold sweat covering her now grayish face. "Call an ambulance," I ordered, staying calm despite the chaos I felt inside. "Now, Javier." While my son ran for the phone, I knelt down beside Alondra. Not out of compassion, though. Part of me was horrified by what I was witnessing, but to make sure she survived to face the consequences of her actions. Sophia came up to me trembling. "Grandma," she whispered. I didn't know what to do. I heard Mom talking on the phone last night, saying she'd gotten a strong heart medicine and that she was going to put it in your cupcake. She said no one would suspect anything because you were already starting to forget things. I hugged my granddaughter, tightly shielding her from the horror unfolding before us. "You did the right thing, my love. You saved my life." The ambulance ride to the hospital was a nightmare. Alondra had completely lost consciousness. The paramedics worked frantically, talking about digoxin and possible poisoning. Javier was in shock, torn between fear for his wife and confusion about what had really happened. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked me in the back seat of the ambulance, his voice broken. "How did this happen?" I held Sophia's note in my pocket, knowing the moment of truth had arrived. But before I could answer, we arrived at the hospital, and the urgency of saving Alondra postponed the conversation that would change our family forever. While the doctors fought to stabilize her, I sat in the cold, impersonal waiting room, Sophia asleep in my lap, and the weight of the truth pressing on my heart. What would I tell Javier? How would I explain to him that his wife, the woman he loved, had tried to kill me? And most importantly, How would I protect my granddaughter from the consequences of having exposed her own mother? The fluorescent lights in the hospital seemed to intensify the unreality of the situation. Just hours earlier, we'd been celebrating my birthday. Now, I was about to unravel a web of family betrayal none of us could ever have imagined. The doctor who saw us seemed too young to bear the weight of the news he was bringing. His dark eyes showed a seriousness that made my heart race with apprehension. "Mrs. Morales?" he addressed me. "I'm Dr. Ramirez. We need to talk about Mrs. Cepeda's condition." Javier, who was sitting next to me holding Sophia's hand, stood up immediately. "How is my wife, doctor? Is she going to be okay?" The doctor hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "She's stable for now, but we found something very concerning in her blood tests." He looked at Sophia, who was awake but quiet, her big eyes taking everything in. "Maybe we should talk in private. Sophia can stay with the nurse in the children's area?" I suggested, realizing the girl shouldn't hear the technical details of what her mother had done. After Sophia was taken away, the doctor led us to a small consultation room. The smell of disinfectant was oppressive, almost suffocating, as we sat on cold plastic chairs. Mrs. Cepeda's blood tests showed alarming levels of digoxin, Dr. Ramirez explained. "It's a medication used to treat heart conditions, but in the amount we found in her system, it's potentially lethal." Javier turned pale, his face a mix of confusion and horror. "Digoxin, Alondra doesn't have heart problems. How did this—" "Why, that's exactly the question, Mr. Cepeda. Your wife shouldn't have digoxin in her system. And the amount we found—" The doctor paused significantly. "Well, it didn't get there by accident." That was when I realized I couldn't put off the truth any longer. With trembling hands, I took Sophia's note from my pocket and handed it to Javier. "Son," my voice sounded steadier than I expected. "Sophia gave me this before we cut the cupcakes." Javier read the note. His hands began to shake uncontrollably. He looked at me, then at the doctor, a look of total disbelief on his face. No, it can't be," he murmured. "Alondra would never. She wouldn't." I switched the cupcakes, Javier, I confessed, feeling an enormous weight lift off my shoulders with the truth. "What Alondra is feeling now is what I would be feeling if I'd eaten what she prepared for me." The doctor watched our interaction with a grave expression. "Mr. Cepeda, Mrs. Morales, I'll have to report this to the police. Poisoning is a serious matter, especially considering the levels of toxicity we found." Javier seemed to age 10 years in just a few minutes. There must be some mistake, he insisted, though his voice had lost its conviction. "Maybe it was an accident. Maybe she mixed up the ingredients." "Son," I said softly, "you know it wasn't an accident." Sophia heard Alondra talking about this on the phone. "And think carefully. Haven't you noticed changes in my behavior in recent months? Confusion, forgetfulness, dizziness." His face showed the exact moment understanding hit him. "My God," he whispered. "Alondra had been telling me you were showing signs of early dementia, that we needed to consider assisted living options for you." He covered his face with his hands. And I believed her. Dr. Ramirez stepped in gently. "Mr. Cepeda, we'd like to run blood tests on your mother as well. If your wife has been giving Mrs. Morales digoxin for some time, we need to assess the potential damage to her heart." I agreed immediately. As the doctor left to arrange the tests, I was left alone with my son, an abyss of betrayal and horror between us. Mom Javier finally spoke, his voice choked. "How could this happen? Why would Alondra do something like this to you?" "Money, probably," I replied, feeling a strange calm now that the truth was coming out. "Do you remember the inheritance I got from Aunt Gabriela 6 months ago? That's when the forgetfulness began. When Alondra started visiting me more, always bringing tea or food she'd prepared especially for me." Javier seemed physically stunned by my words. "She was planning to kill you, and use my name, our relationship, to get your money. And Sophia found out, I added. Imagine the burden that child has carried, discovering what her own mother was doing. At that moment, the door opened, and a middle-aged woman came in, followed by a uniformed officer. Mrs. Morales, Mr. Capeta, I'm Detective Mendez. We need to talk about what happened today. The next few hours were a blur of statements, blood tests, and interrogations. Detective Mendez was meticulous and compassionate, especially when talking with Sophia. The girl, brave beyond her years, told how she'd woken up thirsty the night before and heard her mother on the phone in the kitchen. She was talking about Grandma. Sophia explained, her little voice trembling slightly. She said she'd gotten a strong medicine that would make it seem natural. That Grandma was already showing signs of confusion, and no one would suspect. Her eyes filled with tears. I knew it was wrong. Mom always taught me that poisoning is wrong. In stories, only villains poison people. The moral simplicity of a 10-year-old girl painfully contrasted with the complexity of adult betrayal. As Sophia spoke, I held her hand, amazed by her courage and clarity of thought. The results of my blood tests confirmed our suspicions. There were traces of digoxin in my system, not enough to be fatal, but clear evidence that I'd been gradually poisoned for weeks, maybe months. Chronic digoxin poisoning can cause confusion, memory problems, and fatigue, Dr. Ramirez explained. Symptoms easily attributed to age or early dementia, especially by family members without medical training. Detective Mendez took detailed notes. Mr. Cepeda, has your wife ever suggested changes to your mother's will or finances? Javier looked devastated as he answered. Yes, 2 weeks ago she got my mother to sign a power of attorney giving me control over her finances if her condition got worse. I thought we were helping. And where are those documents now? In our safe at home, along with the other important papers. The detective asked Javier to retrieve those documents as soon as possible. We'll need to investigate when they were drawn up and who prepared them. Documents obtained under false pretenses or coercion are legally invalid. While this conversation was happening, I watched Sophia, who had curled up in a chair in the corner of the room. Her small shoulders carried an immense weight. She had reported her own mother something no child should ever have to do. I went over to her and knelt down, ignoring the pain in my knees. Sophia, my love, I want you to know you did the right thing. You were very, very brave. Her eyes, so much like Javier's, met mine. Will Mom go to prison? How do you answer that? How do you explain to a child that yes, her mother would probably go to prison for trying to kill her grandmother? That our family would never be the same? I don't know what will happen to your mother, I answered, honestly. But I do know that you, your dad, and I will be together. We'll take care of each other, no matter what. She nodded, an understanding far beyond her age in her eyes. Mom did something really bad, didn't she? Yes, sweetheart, I replied, holding her small hands in mine. But that doesn't mean you did something wrong by telling us. You saved my life, Sophia. That night, none of us went home. Javier and Sophia stayed with me in a hotel near the hospital, none of us wanting to return to a house now tainted by Alondra's betrayal. Sophia slept between us in a big bed, her breathing finally peaceful after hours of crying. In the darkness of the room, Javier whispered to me, Mom, how are we going to move on after this? How do we explain to Sophia that her mother tried to... He couldn't finish the sentence. One day at a time, I answered, feeling the weight and wisdom of my 62 years. That's how we go on, one day at a time, with truth and with love. As Sophia slept between us, a symbol of innocence amid betrayal, I promised myself that somehow we would find a way through this nightmare. Not just for me, not just for Javier, but above all, for this brave girl who had sacrificed so much to do what was right. The next morning, we were told that Alondra had regained consciousness. Her condition was stable, though the doctors continued to monitor her heart closely. Detective Mendez suggested that I confront her with the police present to record any confession or incriminating statement. I'm not sure I can face her. I confessed, feeling my hands tremble at the thought of looking into the eyes of the woman who had so methodically planned my death. I completely understand, the detective replied kindly. But your direct testimony would be very valuable to the case. And frankly, Mrs. Morales, many victims find a certain closure in confronting their attackers. Javier offered to go with me, but we decided that Sophia should stay with the social worker during that visit. The girl had already faced enough trauma, and seeing her would certainly destabilize Alondra, possibly compromising the interrogation. Walking down the hospital corridors toward Alondra's room, I felt as if I were walking toward my own execution. The smell of disinfectant seemed stronger, the fluorescent lights harsher. Javier held my arm, though I didn't know if it was to support me or to seek strength himself. 2 uniformed officers guarded the door to the room. Inside, Alondra was pale against the white sheets V-tubes attached to her arm. When she saw us, her face showed a bewildering mix of emotions, surprise, fear, and then quickly a mask of worry and vulnerability. "Guadalupe," she said weakly, reaching out a hand to me. "Thank God you're okay." I was so scared. The ease with which she played the role of the worried victim left me momentarily speechless. It was as if we were living in completely different realities. "No, Alondra?" I finally replied, keeping my distance from the bed. "We're not going to do this. We know what you did. Sophia heard your phone conversation. We know about the digoxin." At the mention of Sophia, I saw the first glimmer of genuine shock on her face. She hadn't considered that her stepdaughter could be the source of the accusation. For a moment, her mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she insisted, but her voice had lost its feigned fragility. "I'm confused. The doctor said I was poisoned. How can you accuse me of something like this when I'm the victim?" Javier, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. "We found the bottles, Alondra, at the bottom of your lingerie drawer. Digoxin prescribed to a patient who doesn't exist." That was a bluff. We hadn't searched her house yet, but her reaction confirmed everything. Her face grew even paler, and for an instant I saw panic in her eyes. "You don't understand," she said, switching tactics. "We were trying to help Guadalupe. She's confused. She's losing her memory. You saw it yourself, Javier. Her episodes are getting more frequent." "There were no episodes," Javier replied, his voice trembling with restrained anger. "It was you poisoning her, slowly making us believe she was developing dementia. Why, Alondra? For her money. For the house." Alondra kept silent for a long moment, weighing her options. Detective Mendez, who had been watching from the corner, stepped forward. "Mrs. Cepeda, we have enough evidence to arrest you for attempted murder. Mrs. Morales' blood work shows chronic digoxin poisoning. Your own blood work shows an almost fatal dose of the same substance. And we have your stepdaughter's testimony. Your cooperation now could be considered in your sentencing." Something changed in Alondra's eyes then. A surrender, perhaps, or a cold recalculation of her chances. She leaned back against the pillows, suddenly seeming more composed, almost professional. "Guadalupe is old?" she said simply, as if stating a weather report. "What is she, 62? How much more useful, dignified life does she really have left? 5 years, 10. And then what diapers confusion a burden to all of us." Her words struck me like physical blows. The casual cruelty, the way she reduced my existence to an inconvenience with an expiration date. "I was offering her a merciful way out," Alondra continued. "A peaceful death, without pain, without the indignity of decline. And yes, then, Javier would have the inheritance, which is his right as the only son. He could finally quit that mediocre job. We could give Sophia the education she deserves. You tried to kill me, I finally found my voice. You came close to me, pretended to care while you slowly poisoned me. How could you, Alondra? I trusted you." For the first time, something like genuine emotion crossed her face. Not remorse, but a kind of impatient irritation. Please, Guadalupe, don't be so dramatic. Do you think you're special? You're just an old woman with money. There are thousands like you clinging to resources that could benefit the younger generation. Javier stepped forward, his face contorted with rage. Shut up. How can you talk about my mother like that? How could you do this to us, to Sophia? Did you think about how this would affect your own daughter? Sophia is young, Alondra replied coldly. She'll get over it. Children are resilient. Detective Mendez gestured to the officer who was recording the conversation. I think we have enough. Mrs. Cepeda, you are formally under arrest for the attempted murder of Guadalupe Morales. You have the right to remain silent. As the detective read her the Miranda rights, I watched Alondra's face. There was no remorse there, only a kind of cold calculation, as if she were still weighing her options, looking for a way out. Her eyes met mine for the last time, and I saw something that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't hate or rage, but a total indifference to my worth as a human being. We left the room in silence, Javier and I supporting each other. In the hallway out of Alondra's earshot, he broke down, leaning against the wall and sliding to the floor. How didn't I see it? He sobbed, covering his face with his hands. How could I have been so blind? She was poisoning my mother right under my nose. And not only did I not notice, I even helped her believing the lies about dementia. I knelt down beside him, ignoring the pain in my aging knees, and held his face in my hands. Son, there was no way you could have known. Alondra is manipulative. That's what she does. She fooled us all. But I'm your son, he insisted, his voice choked. I should protect you. Instead, I was planning to put you in a nursing home because I believed you were becoming senile. Detective Mendez approached, offering tissues to Javier and giving us a moment to recover. Mr. Cepeda, she said kindly, people like your wife are experts at manipulation. They weave such convincing lies that even trained professionals can be fooled. Don't blame yourself. We went back to the hotel where Sophia was waiting for us with the social worker. The girl ran into her father's arms as soon as she saw him, and my heart ached to see the bond between them, something genuine and pure amidst so much deceit. The following days were a blur of police statements, meetings with lawyers, and long talks with psychologists, especially for Sophia. Alondra was transferred from the hospital to prison as soon as her health allowed, formally charged with attempted premeditated murder. The investigation uncovered horrors we never imagined. On her computer, police found extensive searches about digoxin poisoning dementia symptoms and how to forge legal documents. There were also email exchanges with a real estate agency about selling my house, something that would have been possible as soon as the power of attorney she made me sign took effect. Even more disturbing were her conversations with a man named Rafael, apparently an ex-boyfriend she had stayed in contact with. In the messages, she openly discussed her plans. The old lady won't last more than 2 months. I already got the power. When they put her in a nursing home for dementia, we'll sell the house and be free. In other messages, she detailed how she was gradually increasing the doses of digoxin, complaining that I was more resistant than she expected. When the detective showed me this evidence, I felt a deep nausea, not just from the horror of what was planned, but from the cold calculation with which Alondra orchestrated it all. How can someone reduce another human being, someone she shared meals with, celebrated birthdays, with built memories, with, to nothing more than an obstacle to be eliminated? It's more common than you'd think, the detective said when I expressed my shock. We have cases of family poisoning almost every month. It's usually about money, sometimes revenge. What makes Alondra's case unusual is the level of planning and her patience. One night, about a week after the incident, Sophia came into my room in the temporary apartment we had rented. Javier had finally fallen asleep after days of insomnia, and the girl should have been asleep too. Grandma, she whispered, her big eyes shining in the darkness. Can I tell you something? I made space for her on the bed, and she snuggled against me the way she used to when she was younger. Of course, My love, you can tell me anything. I think I knew Mom was doing something bad for a while, she confessed, her voice barely audible. She changed after you got that money from Great Aunt Gabriella. She started talking about how you were getting old, how we needed to prepare for when you couldn't take care of yourself anymore. My heart ached thinking of the burden this child had carried. Why didn't you say anything before sweetheart Sophia was silent for a moment? Because she was my mom, she finally answered. You're always supposed to trust your mom, right? But then... Her voice broke. Then you heard her on the phone? I finished gently. She nodded against my shoulder. She was laughing, Grandma. Laughing while talking about how she was going to put the medicine in your special cupcake, saying it would be poetic if you died on your birthday. A little sob escaped her. How can a mother do something like that? There was no adequate answer to that question. How can you explain to a 10-year-old that some people are born without the ability to feel empathy, without that fundamental connection that makes us human? How can you make sense of what even I couldn't understand? Some people are sick inside, Sophia, I finally said. Not in a way we can see, like when you have a fever or a sore throat. It's an illness of the soul that makes them unable to love or care for others the way they should. Did Mom not love me either? The vulnerability in that question broke my heart. My love. I don't know if Alondra is capable of loving anyone the way you and I understand love. But I do know your father loves you more than anything in the world, and I love you too, my brave girl. She was silent for a long moment, processing this with the wisdom beyond her years that children facing trauma often develop. Can I sleep here with you tonight, Grandma? Of course you can, my love. As Sophia fell asleep in my arms, I thought about the uncertain future ahead of us, Alondra's trial, the inevitable divorce, the emotional scars we would all carry, especially this little warrior who had been forced to choose between loyalty to her mother and doing what was right. But beneath the pain and betrayal, there was a thread of hope. The three of us, Javier, Sophia, and I, had been united by this terrible experience in a way that perhaps would never have happened otherwise. The lies had been exposed, the manipulation removed. What remained was real, a genuine love based not on false pretenses or hidden agendas, but on a shared truth, however painful it might be. We'll get through this, I whispered to the sleeping Sophia, a promise to her and to myself. Together, we'll find our way through this darkness. Alondra's trial began 6 months after my fateful birthday. Half a year of emotional and legal preparation of therapy sessions and sleepless nights. Half a year of rebuilding our little family from the wreckage of betrayal. The courthouse was an imposing building of gray stone, as cold and formal as the justice system it represented. I sat in the first row with Javier at my side, and Sophia between us, all of us dressed formally with solemn expressions. The prosecutor, a middle-aged woman named Carmen Vasquez, had prepared us meticulously for this moment. But nothing could really prepare us to see Alondra enter, escorted dressed in a plain gray suit, her hair pulled back in a strict bun. She looked somehow smaller, stripped of the power she once held over our lives. Her eyes swept the courtroom, lingering briefly on us. When her gaze met Sophia's, I saw something I'd never noticed before, a spark of something almost human quickly suppressed. The judge, the Honorable Maria Elena Gutierrez, was a woman of imposing presence and piercing gaze. We are here for the case of the state versus Alondra Cepeda, charged with attempted premeditated murder, elder abuse, poisoning, forgery, and fraud. Her voice echoed in the silent room. My testimony was first. I walked to the witness stand, with steps I hoped looked firmer than I felt. As I swore to tell the truth, I noticed how my hands looked wrinkled under the courtroom lights, hands that had cooked for Alondra, that had held newborn Sophia, that now trembled slightly as I raised them to take the oath. The prosecutor guided me through the narrative of events with professional delicacy. I told about the forgetfulness that began after I received Aunt Gabriella's inheritance. How Alondra began visiting me more often, always bringing food or tea. How I gradually started to feel confused, to doubt my own mind. Mrs. Morales, the prosecutor, asked, "What symptoms did you experience during that period?" "Dizziness, confusion, extreme fatigue." I answered, feeling the weight of the memories. There were days when I couldn't remember what I'd done that morning. Moments when I lost my train of thought, mid-sentence. I began to think I was developing dementia like my husband. And did these symptoms follow any specific pattern? They always got worse after Alondra's visits. At the time, I attributed it to the agitation of having company. Now I know it was because she was putting digoxin in my food or drink. Naturally, the defense tried to discredit my testimony. Alondra's lawyer, a thin man with calculating eyes, insinuated that I could in fact be suffering from early dementia, and that the accusations were the result of mental confusion. He suggested that perhaps I was the one who had put the digoxin in Alondra's cupcake during a moment of paranoia. "Mrs. Morales," he asked with feigned concern, "isn't it true that your own mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 63, just a year older than you are now?" I kept my composure, though I could feel my face flush with indignation. My mother had Alzheimer's, yes, but unlike her condition, my symptoms began and ended according to your client's presence in my life, and curiously disappeared completely after my poisoned birthday. The medical tests speak for themselves. Toxicology reports clearly showed the presence of digoxin in my system, not at lethal levels, but consistent with chronic poisoning. Dr. Ramirez's testimony confirmed that my symptoms were fully compatible with digoxin intoxication, not dementia. But it was Sophia's testimony that silenced the courtroom. Small and solemn in her navy blue dress, she spoke with a clarity that made several jurors wipe their eyes. I heard my mom on the phone. She said, her voice surprisingly steady. She was laughing about putting medicine in Grandma's special cupcake. She said it would be her last birthday. "And what did you do?" after hearing that, Sophia the prosecutor asked gently. I got scared. I didn't know what to do. Then I remembered what my teacher always says about seeing something bad. If you see something, say something. So I wrote a note to Grandma. "That was a very brave decision," the prosecutor commented. "Were you afraid of what might happen?" Sophia looked directly at Alondra for the first time. "I was afraid Grandma would die, and I was afraid my mom would be mad at me. But Grandma always taught me we have to do what's right, even when it's hard." In the weeks that followed, the trial revealed the full extent of Alondra's plans. Forensic experts recovered deleted emails, search histories, and text messages that painted a picture of meticulous manipulation. The medical evidence was unquestionable. The legal documents she had me sign were clearly obtained under coercion and false pretenses. Even more devastating was the discovery through Detective Mendez's deeper investigation that Alondra had done this before. An elderly woman in Tijuana, a distant cousin of her first husband, had died under similar circumstances 3 years earlier. Elena Gomez, 76, had left a modest inheritance to Alondra after a sudden degenerative illness. The family had suspected something, but without concrete proof, nothing could be done at the time. "The pattern is identical," the detective explained in court. Gradual approach, gaining trust, suggesting mental decline, isolating the victim from other relatives, changing legal documents, and finally, a death that seemed natural. When it was Alondra's turn to testify, her strategy had changed. She was no longer the confident manipulator I had confronted in the hospital. Now she presented herself as a broken woman, a victim of childhood abuse, suffering from borderline personality disorder that made her incapable of fully understanding the morality of her actions. "I just wanted what was best for our family," she said, with perfectly timed tears rolling down her face. Javier was unhappy at work. Sophia needed a better education. I wasn't thinking clearly. I simply saw a solution for our problems. I watched her performance with a mixture of fascination and repulsion. There was something almost admirable about the way she could reinvent herself, adapting her personality to circumstances like a chameleon. If it hadn't been for the mountain of evidence against her, I might almost have believed her contrition. The jurors were not deceived. After only 6 hours of deliberation, they returned with the verdict guilty on all counts. The sentence 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole, considering the premeditation and her history of similar behavior. When the judge announced the sentence, I felt a strange absence of triumph. There was no joy in seeing a life wasted that way, only a deep exhaustion and a longing to move on. Sophia cried silently beside Javier, not out of sadness for her mother's sentence, but in relief that the nightmare was over. As we left the courthouse that day under the clear autumn sky, I realized that we were finally free, not just from the physical threat that Alondra posed, but from the emotional power she had exercised over us. "What do we do now?" Javier asked as we walked to the car, Sophia holding our hands between us, forming a small human chain of survivors. "We live," I replied simply. "We heal, we rebuild." In the months that followed the trial, that's exactly what we did. Javier sold the house he had shared with Alondra. None of us could bear the memories embedded in those walls, and he found a bright apartment with big windows that filled the rooms with light. Sophia changed schools a new start where she wouldn't be the girl whose mother tried to kill her grandmother. I made changes too. I sold my old house full of memories now stained and bought a small 2-bedroom home near Javier's apartment. I planted a garden in the backyard, something I'd always wanted to do, but had never found the time or energy for. There was something deeply therapeutic about sinking my hands into the earth, nurturing new life after coming so close to death. Sophia spent her afternoons with me after school while Javier worked. Together, we made cakes and cookies, reclaiming our culinary traditions from the poison of betrayal. I taught her to knit, to play chess, to recognize the constellations in the night sky. In return, she taught me how to use a tablet to play her favorite video games, to understand the complexities of the music young people listen to nowadays. Gradually, the wounds began to heal. Not perfectly, there would always be scars, but enough that we could find joy again, that we could trust, even if a little cautiously. 1 year after the cupcake incident, we celebrated my 63rd birthday. It was a simple party in the garden of my new house, just the 3 of us and a few new friends I had made in the elder abuse survivor support group I started attending. Javier grilled, and Sophia had decorated the yard with colorful lanterns. There were no cupcakes. I don't think we could ever look at one the same again. Instead, Sophia and Javier made a simple chocolate cake. When the candles were lit, I looked at the faces around me glowing in the golden light. Faces of people who truly loved me with no hidden agendas or ulterior motives. "Make a wish," Grandma Sophia said, her eyes shining. I closed my eyes and wished for what we had already begun, to build a life of truth, of restored trust, of love that heals. When I blew out the candles, I felt not just the weight of my 63 years, but the lightness of someone who has been given a second chance. It's been 3 years since the birthday that nearly became my last. Today, at 65, I find myself reflecting on all that has changed, all that I've learned about trust, betrayal, and surprisingly, forgiveness. Javier found new love. Carmen is a literature professor at the local university, a woman with an easy laugh and kind eyes, who came into our lives like a fresh breeze after a storm. At first, Javier was hesitant, weighed down by guilt and fear. "What if I can't see the signs again?" he confessed to me one night. "What if my judgment is permanently damaged, son?" I answered, holding his hands. "What happened was not a failure of your judgment. It was the result of Alondra's exceptional ability to manipulate and deceive, and now all of us have sharper lie detectors." When Carmen came to dinner at my house for the first time, I watched her with eyes trained by bitter experience. But where Alondra had shown calculated smiles and superficial interest, Carmen offered genuine laughter and sincere curiosity. Where Alondra had isolated Javier from me, Carmen encouraged our relationship, often suggesting activities for the 3 of us, and soon for the 4 of us, including Sophia. Sophia, now 13, flourished under her father's steady care and my unconditional love. Therapy helped her process her mother's betrayal and understand that none of it was her fault. "You made the bravest and most right decision possible," her therapist assured her again and again. "You saved your grandmother and helped your mother face the consequences of her choices." Of course, there are still difficult days. Days when Sophia comes home from school with red eyes because some cruel child mentioned her murderer mother. Days when she wonders if she might turn out like Alondra, a fear we address immediately with love and therapy. Kindness isn't just something we're born with, I explained during one of those crises. It's also a choice we make every day, and you, my dear, make that choice constantly. Alondra's life in prison remains a peripheral presence in ours. She writes letters occasionally to Javier, to Sophia, even to me. The first ones were manipulative, full of self-victimization and subtle attempts to sow discord. "Your father never tells you the whole truth, Sophia," she wrote once. "Ask him about our secret bank account." There was no secret account, just another attempt to create mistrust. Over time, as her manipulations got no response, the letters became more honest, or at least as honest as someone like Alondra can be. "I don't know why I did what I did," she wrote in her most recent letter. "There's something broken in me that I can't fix." Javier reads the letters, sometimes responds with simple updates about Sophia's life, but keeps firm boundaries. Sophia, after careful thought and discussions with her therapist, decided not to read her mother's letters until she felt emotionally ready, maybe when she's older. Surprisingly, I replied to one of Alondra's letters not out of any desire for reconciliation or unresolved need for confrontation, but out of something more complex, a desire to understand the incomprehensible. "Why me?" I asked her directly. "Of all the people with resources you could have targeted, why your husband's mother?" Her reply arrived weeks later, written in strangely childish handwriting for a woman of her intelligence. "You were there. You trusted me. It was easy." The casual cruelty of those words hit me in a way that even her previous actions hadn't. The randomness of it. It could have been anyone with money who crossed her path and let their guard down. That understanding brought a strange kind of release. Alondra's betrayal was never really about me, my flaws, my naivete, or my vulnerabilities. It was about the emptiness inside her that nothing could fill. With that understanding came not exactly forgiveness, but a kind of detachment. I no longer needed to carry anger as armor against future betrayals. Instead, I redirected my energy into something more constructive. Along with 2 other elder abuse survivors I met in the support group, I founded a small organization called Silver Vigilance. Our goal is to educate seniors and their families about the signs of financial and physical abuse, especially when it comes from those closest to them. We visit community centers, assisted living facilities, and retirement groups, sharing our stories and providing practical resources. Isolation is the first tactic we explain. If someone is trying to limit your access to other loved ones or friends, that's a red flag. More importantly, we stress that there is no shame in having been deceived. Manipulators are specialists in what they do, I say, at every talk. They study your vulnerabilities, gain your trust, and exploit exactly what you value, most often, your love for your family. Our work attracted unexpected interest from the local media. A newspaper did a story on us, which led to a TV interview. Suddenly, I was getting emails and calls from people all over the country who had gone through similar experiences or suspected something was wrong in their families. "My daughter-in-law insists I'm getting confused," wrote a 78-year-old woman. "But I only feel that way after she brings me her special tea." We encouraged this lady to seek medical help immediately and to contact the authorities. Weeks later, she wrote again confirming that toxicology tests had detected sedatives in her system. This work became my mission, my way of turning betrayal into something meaningful. Every person we help protect is a small victory against what Alondra represents, the exploitation of the vulnerable by those who should care for them. At home, our little expanded family found new rhythms and traditions. Carmen moved into Javier's apartment last year, bringing her collection of old books, and her black cat named Shakespeare. Sophia, initially wary of this new mother figure, gradually let her guard down when she realized Carmen wasn't interested in replacing anyone, not her biological mother, nor the special relationship she had with me. Our Sunday nights became sacred. We gather for dinner sometimes at my house, sometimes at theirs, and each of us shares a moment of gratitude from the week. It's a simple practice, but it keeps us anchored in the present, appreciating what we have instead of ruminating on the past. I'm grateful for my new friend Lucia Sophia shared recently. She was the only one in class who stood up for me when Miguel made that joke about my mom being in jail. I'm grateful for your strength, Sophia Javier said, his eyes shining with pride. You teach me every day what it means to be brave. I'm grateful for these moments, Carmen added, for this family that has welcomed me with so much love. When it was my turn, I looked at the faces around the table. My son, who had found the strength to trust again. My granddaughter, whose courage at 10 years old had saved my life. And Carmen, who came into our broken family with nothing but genuine love. I'm grateful for the second chance, I said simply. For being alive to see this moment. Later that night, alone in my house, I looked out at the garden I had planted 3 years earlier. The timid seeds had transformed into a small paradise of color and life. Climbing roses covered the back wall. Sunflowers leaned into the light. Herbs grew in hand-painted pots by Sophia. It was such an obvious metaphor, it almost made me smile. From the poisoned earth of betrayal, we had created something new and beautiful. Not perfect. There were still weeds to pull, dry seasons to get through. But truly ours. At 65, I learned that trust once broken is never restored in quite the same way. It grows differently, more cautiously perhaps, but also more valued for knowing what it means to lose it like a bone that after breaking can become stronger exactly where it was fractured. Surrounded by my family, I felt a deep gratitude for the journey we had traveled together. It wasn't the path any of us would have chosen, marked as it was by betrayal and near tragedy. But it was our path, and we had walked it with courage, with love, with a determination that surprised even us. 5 years after the cupcake that nearly ended my life, I no longer define myself as a victim, or even just as a survivor. I am simply Guadalupe mother-grandmother, advocate for important causes, a woman who lives each day with an intensity I might never have discovered if death hadn't come so close. Life goes on, always, sometimes broken, sometimes repaired, but always precious, always infinitely precious. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click on the next video appearing on your screen, because there you'll find a story of betrayal and rebellion like you've never seen before.